For the first part, I'll go through some slides. The idea is to kind of take you through some of the key functionalities and talk a little bit in depth on some of the category features that's getting enabled with Release 3 OSM. And then show you a video of the demo. Unfortunately, there's no connectivity or cable here, so we can change the mode to a recorded video that we're going to run through. And we'll go through, it's a 13-minute video that will run through, and you'll see how role-based access control and multi-tenancy or multi-project gets configured on OSM Release 3, okay? All right, so as part of this particular tutorial, there are 4 key components that I was going to talk about. One is role-based access control. Adrian talked a little bit at length about it. When you talk to any carrier, one of the key requirements is really have the ability to authenticate and authorize, right? And they want to be able to provide different privileges to different type of users. So we'll talk about a little bit more deeper in the next slides coming up on our back. Multi-tenancy or multi-project, this is another component introduced in Release 3 with OSM this year. And Adrian may have talked about this with OSM. Release 3 is supposed to be delivered by end of October. I think the idea is to get that hopefully released earlier by end of this week or by Friday. So multi-tenancy, multi-project, we'll spend a little bit of time on it. This is also a neat feature that carriers do require to have the ability to kind of have some boundary across different projects that they can give access to different individuals who own their own domain in terms of getting specific VNF packages uploaded and instantiated. We'll spend a little bit of time on VNF onboarding and one of the key features that's coming in with VNF onboarding this year. And then lastly, there's one slide on carrier grade feature set that's kind of important for carriers. And if there are any carriers here, you're welcome to add in your thoughts on what else can be included in OSM Release 3. Okay, so RBAC. Most of you are probably familiar with RBAC, right? This is not a new concept. The overall gist is that you have different roles based on your user authentication. You have the different tiers of users. If you take a carrier groups or organizations, for example, you might have a planning organization. You might have a group that only does all the testing in their labs. There might be another group that does all the launch and operations of the the physical or the virtual components. So how do you give all of them different privileges? You may also have a NOC or where some groups that specifically monitor the health of a system that's been launched. So those all those different compartmentalizing of the ownership is done through RBAC, and it's a great feature that is absolutely required by when you actually take this into production. And earlier, Francisco and Adrian touched upon the fact that OSM Release 3 is one of the gist was to be able to take it into production and run with it. So when you define a user, there are obviously projects and resources, and depending upon that, there are different type of access, a read access or a write access, or having the capability to do CRUDX operations, right? Create, update, delete, execute, etc. So some of those features are all baked into the RBAC role permissions for a user itself. So when you define a role, you will define what projects that particular user has access to. Then you also define what kind of privileges for a given project that user is allowed to do. Overall, the users are kind of in 2 tiers. Either you are an operator or you are an admin role. And again, on top of it, there are multiple kind of grouping of the admin and operator roles. You can have a catalog admin operator role. You can have a specific lifecycle manager operator admin role, or you can have a normal account management admin operator role. So there are these multiple groupings on top of it. All this combined kind of should give you enough combinations to be able to figure out what structure you need when you are taking this software into production and for groups that you're going to be deploying it with. All right. A simplified picture, basically you a bunch of users. Users have different type of roles, and then each roles have different level of access into the resources. And here the resources could be, the account management where you add your Vim accounts and your RO accounts, your SDN accounts, or it could be your access to the catalog management, which is where you add your VNF descriptors or network service descriptors and packages. Or you could be, allowed to do lifecycle management, which is instantiate, scale up, scale down, etc., on a given running, or having the ability to launch a VNF itself. All right, so besides RBAC, now RBAC by itself, just the user authentication authorization piece is one part of it, but multi-tenancy or multi-project was also an important aspect that's been brought into Release 3. Why is this important? It's important because you have different organizations and you have different groups, and you have, as you go through your workflow in your, production environment, you may have or groups that specifically focus on, onboarding a VNF. There may be groups that specifically focus on, testing that VNF in your environment, whether it's end-to-end service testing or performance and capacity testing. And then maybe other groups who wants to do their, launch of the VNF itself and monitoring and whatnot. So in these regards, you may want to have the ability to create different projects, and different projects with different purposes. You could have a project defined for some of the VNF vendors who have different specific access just to their catalog, where they can, onboard and get it tested. You may have projects defined specifically focused on a whole service, like a virtual IMS service or a virtual EPC service. So the ability gives this multi-tenancy or multi-project gives you this ability to have multiple projects, and then have users tagged on top of it with different permissions, etc. Okay. Good example of multi-tenancy. Now, the video that's going to be run right after this set of slides that I run through will take you through role-based access control and multi-tenancy or multi-project, and how to get that configured on OSM Release 3. So you will see multiple users. There's an example of 4 users here, but you will see, I think, about 6 or 7 user examples in that 13-minute video, and you will see the different type of access given to a given user and what kind of privileges assigned to it. But this kind of shows you the overall gist of different projects or tenants, and different users having specific abilities to do X, Y, Z. All right, the next aspect, and Adrian spent a little bit of time on this, which is specifically focused on service assurance. But what is service assurance, right? One of the key components of service assurance is the ability to monitor. And once you monitor specific KPI elements, what do you do with it? There are thresholds that you can configure, there are policies you can write, and based on the policies, the overall gist is you can take different actions, right? So the idea is that you create a policy, you identify the thresholds, you identify the VNFs, and you identify an action that gets taken when that policy is hit. So scaling is a prime example of service assurance that's enabled in Release 3. It allows you, in the network service descriptor, and this you will see in the UI as well, it allows you to create a scaling descriptor, scaling group, scaling policy. It also allows you to pick and choose your, the KPI monitoring elements from a given VNF that you want to be monitoring, and then you can write policies or thresholds along with it. You can have scale out, scale in actions associated with each of them, and then you can take the triggering action, which could be instantiating an additional instance of a VNF in that NS, or it could be removing an existing running NS when the KPI is not really high. But those are all baked into the network service descriptor. So if you do get a chance to download OSM Release 3 once it's put on the website later this week, definitely play around with scaling. This is a great functionality. There are third-party service assurance companies out there that do at a much bigger level service assurance. But what OSM Release 3 gives you is the ability to create this simple policy component within the solution itself, so you don't really have to go out and get a third-party integration done to do just basic, scale up, scale down, etc. actions. Okay, and this becomes more of an important aspect with all the monitoring modules that's getting added by with Release 3 and Release 4. And you saw Adrian presented about a bunch of experimental features being added in for monitoring in Release 3, and that keep getting better in Release 4. Those will all get tied up to the service assurance policies coming up. All right, so the last slide here, from Rooftop, we've been kind of working with different carriers at different levels. And some of the key requirements that keeps coming up, it's not related to overall features on an orchestration, but also, hey, look, we are a carrier, it has to be a carrier-grade product in order for us to install your solution, right? So they bring up, and some of those requirements that they bring up front, even before going into the details of what your orchestration can actually do, are RBAC, multi-tenancy, the ability to do service assurance from the framework itself, security components of it. They obviously want to do comply to several security standards, resiliency, and this is another important part. They don't want to be launching an orchestration or any software suite that doesn't have 5 nines or cannot recover itself when one of the process dies, right? So that's another important aspect of it that's getting added. And the resiliency part, Release 4 will have much more of it than what we have in Release 3 at the moment, but you will see that being baked in. Interoperability, Adrian had a lot of information on interoperability part. You will see a lot of private Vim with OpenStack flavors being used in a lot of the carriers, but you do see some situations where there are hybrid launches, right? You have certain VNFs launched in AWS, and then you will have VNFs launched on your private network, and having the ability to do hybrid launches is another key capability. ODL Floodlight and ONOS plugins, this is one of the Adrian mentioned about I think it's a hackathon that's coming up in January. You will see some of these functionalities used there as we onboard VNFs in that particular activity. Okay. The last part here are Python-based client. Getting a VNF integrated just to bring up an instantiate is one part of it. But what additional functionalities that the Python client allows you to do are write additional scripts in terms of whether it's configuration, in terms of whether it's VNF health check. You can create multiple scripts that can be run as service primitives to run on a network service that's already running. This allows you to do additional config elements. It allows you to stop a service. It allows you to do health check primitives, et cetera, right? So Python really gives you or empowers you to add all those on-demand scripts that can be used to enhance a running network service, okay? Any questions on any of these slides so far? The next file, it's going to be a 13-minute video, but it'll purely focus on RBAC configuration and multi-project or multi-tenancy part. So we'll go there. And there is audio with it, so you don't have to hear me. You can listen to whoever is talking. It's much more clear.
This video will provide an overview of the role-based access control and multi-tenancy functionality. Role-based access control provides authentication and authorization. Authentication is the verification that a user is who they say they are. A user authenticates by providing their username or proving they know a secret, such as a password. Authorization is the control over access to system resources. Access is granted to users by defining a role, which has a well-defined set of permissions. Users are assigned roles and inherit the role's permissions. A new installation has a single super admin user configured by default. Multi-tenancy is implemented using a construct called a project. All content in the Launchpad is scoped into a single project. When a user accesses the Launchpad, they will always be in the context of a project. If a user has access to more than one project, they can switch projects dynamically. The Launchpad comes predefined with a default project. Now let's log into the Launchpad using the default super admin user, which is named admin. The super admin user by default is taken into the administration section of the user interface. This gives them access to project management, user management, logging, debug, and about sections of the interface. As a super user, they also have access to every other part of the interface with full CRUD-X capabilities throughout all sections. Now let's create a set of additional users who will also be able to access the system. To add users, I'm going to go into User Management and click the Add User button. From here, I can enter user information such as the username and create a password for that user. I'm going to create a series of 6 users, which I will then use to populate various other projects and roles within the system. I'm also going to create a 7th user who I want to make a super admin and use that user to replace the default admin that came shipped with the system. To assign Alice the super user role, I'm going to click the Platform Role Management tab. From here, I can manage the roles at the admin and super admin levels. If I click Edit under User Roles, I'll now be able to select Alice, and I will be able to add her to the list, and then I can give her the super admin role. Now I want to log out from the admin user and log back in as Alice. To do this, I'm going to go up to the User menu in the upper right-hand corner. This shows the currently logged in user, which is admin, and provide links to edit your profile and to log out. If we log out, we return to the login screen, and from here I can log back in as Alice. Because Alice has the super admin role, she has unrestricted access to all functionality inside the application. Now we want to go create a set of additional projects inside the application. To do that, I'm going to go to the Administration menu and go into Project Management. In the Project Management list, we see the default project. I'm going to create 2 additional projects. The first project will be called Ant Team. And the second project we'll call Zebra Team. Now that I've created these 2 additional projects, I need to assign users to these projects with a specific project role. In the Ant Team, I'm going to edit the project, and under User Roles, I'm going to add Betty to the project. Once she's added to the project, I need to assign her a role. In this case, I'm going to give her the project admin role. This will give Betty access to all functionality inside the Launchpad related to the application itself. So this includes the Launchpad, the catalog, and the account management. What the project management role does not provide is access to much of the administration menu. That is only accessible by a super admin. Likewise, I'm going to go into the Zebra project, and I want to make sure I've got a project admin defined for this project. So I'm going to add Yolanda to the project and give her the project admin role. Now that project admins have been created, I want to go back to the Ant Team project and add an additional set of users who will have access to this project. To do that, I'm going to go back into editing the project and add the additional users that I would like. So we'll add 1, 2, 3, 4 more users to this project. And since I've already assigned a project admin for this project, I won't bother to give these users roles yet. I'll leave that up to the project admin to do. Likewise, I'm going to go back to the Zebra team and add 1 additional user into that project. Now let's log out of Alice's account and log back in as Betty. So Betty is a project manager, which means she has access to the Launchpad catalog and account sections of the UI, and under administration, she also has access to project management. Her project management list is scoped to the project managements for which she has a role. In this case, she's the project manager for the ANT team, so that's what she sees in her list. So now we're going to go into the ANT team, and we see a similar view that we saw that Alice had. So we're going to go into edit mode. And now Betty's going to go through and assign her users to the correct role. So you can see across the top there's a number, there's 3 categories of roles, each of which have an admin and an opper associated with them. So we have the catalog admin opper, the LCM admin opper, and the account admin opper. The admins have permissions, full permissions on each of those areas, meaning they can create, read, update, delete, and execute all objects inside that system. Oppers only have read access to those contents within those sections. So what Betty's going to do is go through and she's going to make Ben a project opper, which means he'll have read access to everything in the system. And we'll make Charles the LCM admin, meaning he has access to lifecycle management capabilities, including instantiation, configuration, scaling, termination of network services, and virtual network functions. We'll make Darla a catalog management admin, which means she'll have access to the onboarding and management of NS and VNF packages, including graphical descriptor composition. And Edgar, in this case, will become the account admin. That means he has the ability to configure connected systems, including Vim accounts, SDN accounts, and config agents. So we'll update the permissions for all of those users. Now let's log in as each one of these users to see how the user interface reflects the roles that have been assigned. So we'll log out as Betty, and let's log back in as Charles. Charles had the LCM capabilities assigned to him, so in this case you're seeing that the navigation has scoped down to only provide the launchpad, meaning he's allowed to access the dashboard, instantiate services, and manipulate the SSH keys. All of the other catalog and account functionality to which he does not have access is not present in the UI. Now let's log in as Edgar. Edgar was assigned the account admin role, so when he accesses the system, the navigation is scoped down to only provide access to the account management screens. He does have he's an administrator, so he has full CRUDX capabilities here and is able to add RO accounts and manipulate them as required. And finally, if we log in as Darla, Darla had the catalog administration role, and so she is only able to access the catalog. Now that we're logged into the catalog management functionality, let's go ahead and onboard some descriptors into this catalog. In the ANT team project, we're going to onboard the ping pong NSD and VNFDs. So I'm going to select the VNFDs and onboard them into the catalog. And then I'm going to onboard the NSD. And now we see that ping pong is successfully onboarded into the catalog inside the ANT team project. Now let's log back out and log back in as Alice, because we want to add an additional user onto the Zebra team. And in this case, we're going to add Edgar into the Zebra team project. You recall Edgar is also added to the ANT team project. On that team, he has the account admin role. As the administrator, I'm going to give Edgar the catalog management or catalog admin role inside the Zebra team project. Now I want to log out, and I want to log back in as Edgar. Now Edgar by default has come back in, and you can see up here in the corner we have the project switcher. So it's currently displaying that he's logged into the Ant Team project, but if I open this menu you can see that he now has access to both of these projects. In this case on the Ant Team he's the account admin, so he's only able to view the account screen. If we switch from the Ant Team to the Zebra Team, now Edgar, who has the catalog admin role on the Zebra Team, is presented with that screen. You can also see that in this case the catalog is empty. The ping pong descriptors that were onboarded into the Ant Team project are not visible in any other project except that team. Finally, let's log out of Edgar and log back in as Ben. Ben was given the project operator role, and so that means he has full access to everywhere in the project, but he only has read access. So for example, if we come into the catalog using Ben's account, all of the manipulation functionality is disabled for him. He cannot onboard descriptors, delete descriptors, or anything else. He is able to view descriptors, but he has no access rights to create any additional objects inside the system. And that concludes our overview of role-based access control and multi-tenancy.
All right, so that concludes my portion. Nate will come up next and do his part. If there are any questions on my section, do ask away. I'll be here after the sections as well.